Welcome back. In this video, we're moving along in our Getting Started series, and we'll be going over how to use FileQuery to analyze the data in your file so you can better understand what it contains as well as validate certain criteria such as the uniqueness of a field or the format of the file. Under the Analyze Validate menu, you'll see 5 functions for analysis and 2 for validation. They're very straightforward, so we can quickly go through each of them, starting with the distinct values function. This function allows you to take any field or combination of fields and find all distinct values that it contains, as well as how many times each of those occurs. Or if you check this option, you can just get a count of how many distinct values there are. Let's start by finding out which states are in the file and which are the most common. Simply select state as your field, hit enter, and you can see that Massachusetts is the most common by a wide margin. Finding combinations of fields such as city and state is just as easy. Simply select both fields and they'll be joined together into a single value using the field separator, which defaults to a dash. Spread out the fields, scroll down a bit, and you can see that Chelmsford, Mass and Chelmsford, Rhode Island are now treated separately. And last, if you only want to compare the first few characters, such as the first 5 digits of a 9-digit zip code, that's easy as well. Remove the second field, select zip code, and enter 5. Now let's look at the duplicate values function, where you can see that it's identical to the distinct values function when it comes to selecting your fields. The big difference is the extra options for controlling what you select. By default, it will display all duplicate values as well as how many times each one appears, just like with the distinct values function. There are also 5 other options with a description of each in the info section below, and they should all be very straightforward. The 2 count options could use some clarification though. Count of values tells you how many different values occur more than once in the file. So if a field is supposed to be unique but actually has 3 records with the same value, this option will return 1 because there's only one value that occurs multiple times. Count of occurrences takes all values that occur multiple times and sums up how many times each of them occurs. So if value A occurs twice and B occurs 3 times, then the result would be 5. The only thing left to note is how 2 of the options say slower next to them. That's because they have to read through the file twice, once to find all duplicate values, and then a second time to get the data to display. Field length function is next, and is very simple with only 2 options. You just pick a field, and then whether you want the min or max length, or frequency of the different lengths. Frequency would be similar to the distinct function, and that would show you all different lengths of the value and how many times each one occurs. Let's just get the max length of the last name field. Now we come to what many will find to be the most useful function when looking at a new file. The goal of the frequency report is to make one pass through the file and give you as much information about it as possible. By default, it will look at all the fields and give you information about them such as the number of distinct and empty values, min and max length, character types such as numbers, letters, whitespace, and special characters, and also a list of the actual values as well as how many times each one occurs. Let's see an example and then look at what options we have to modify it. First, you can see a line count for the file, and then you get information about each individual field. For customer ID, you can see there are 1,000 distinct values, making the entire field unique. None of the records are missing a value. The min and max field lengths are the same, meaning all values are 9 characters, and the only character type is D for digits, meaning all values are numbers. Below that is a list of the values in the field and how many times they occur. Since we know this field is unique, all values here will only occur once. Let's make some more room for the results, and then scroll down to find the second field, which we can see only has 2 distinct values, meaning it's not unique. It still doesn't have any missing values. The values are not all the same length, and they only contain letters. Both values are then displayed, and we see about 2/3 of the file contain individual records. The report then continues on the same way for all other fields. Now we'll see what options we have to adjust. First is the ability to process certain fields. Next is a limit for how many individual values to track for any one field. This is useful for fields where the values don't occur multiple times, as it keeps memory from being wasted trying to keep track of all of them. Aggregate information such as the number of empty values, min, max length, and character types is still given. Below you'll see 2 display formats available, and the options below that only apply to the standard one. It lets you modify how many distinct values you want to see and how you want them sorted. This is great for when you're viewing all fields and only want to see the most common values. To view the top 5 for each field, for example, simply select a display count of 5 and then leave sort by as count descending. The last option, when unchecked, just allows you to remove the aggregate information and only show you the values for each field. Let's leave that checked and run it again, seeing how much easier it is to view now that there aren't as many values being displayed. As you can see, it's now a lot easier to do a first pass over all the fields in a file, and then if you see anything interesting, you can always go back and run again against just those fields, displaying all the values. The last option we want to look at is the delimited format, which is even better for getting a high-level view of what's in a file. It doesn't show you any actual values of the fields, but it gives you all the rest of the information and formats it so each field is on its own line, making it very quick and easy to browse through even hundreds of fields. Let's see what it looks like. Spread out the fields, and right away we can see that almost all fields are completely full, with only one of them missing any values. The fill level field, while it isn't necessarily as valuable here, is a great visual way to see how many values are missing from a field. Each star represents 10% of the file, so you can see what fields are mostly full or empty at a glance. Everything else is pretty straightforward and is exactly what you would get in the standard format, but in a more compact view. Now there are only 3 functions left to go over. The line count function does just what its name says and doesn't have any options. The only thing to mention is that if file query recognizes a header record, it won't count it towards the line count, so be sure to keep that in mind. Next, the validate field count function will go through the file and look for any line that doesn't have the correct number of fields. The most common cause of this usually involves issues with quotes, so be sure that the is quoted option is correctly set before running. For each record found, you can then select the line number along with how many fields that were there, the actual line itself, or you can just get a single count of how many records have the wrong number of fields. Finally, validate line length works the same way as validating the field count, but is meant for fixed width files and will point out any lines that don't have the correct length. Having gone through the first 3 videos, you should now be able to use file query to get almost any information you could want from any file. The next and final video will then go over using file query to modify the file, whether it's just changing some of the data or the actual format itself.